Who are the best remaining teams in the NFL playoffs? Welcome, football fans, to another NFL Power Ranking live stream. It's Mitch here to break down and rank the 9 remaining playoff teams. Yes, the 9. I know that doesn't really make mathematical sense because there is a game tonight. We'll be down to 8 in the divisional round. In the divisional round, we'll have 4 in the AFC and 4 in the NFC. Well, we're ranking the 2 teams that are playing tonight, all right? This is a Monday morning stream. We're going to talk about maybe a little bit of a prediction tonight. Vikings, Rams, it should be a great game, just as we saw on Sunday night. That game could have went either way as well. And I'm going to discuss my top 9. It's not going to be a lot like others. It's not going to be based on the seed of the team, the record of the team. It's going to be based on some stats. It's going to be based on who they beat in the regular season. It's going to be based on the vibes. It's going to be based on my eye test of each and every team and what I look for in a potential Super Bowl champion. Okay, it's the playoffs. Everybody starts at 0-0. Once again, a couple teams have advanced to 1-0, and we'll see who can raise the Lombardi, win the NFC, and win the AFC. All right, so let's get started, guys. Let me know in the live chat who you guys think is the best team remaining in the playoffs. Let me know your order and your rankings here live. Okay, let's get started with, in my opinion, the worst team in the playoffs, which this was tough, and it was debated between 2 teams at the bottom, and we'll get to the other team in just a second. But the worst team, in my opinion, with the least chance of going to the Super Bowl and winning is the Washington Commanders as the number 9 team. Now, this was tough because I was impressed by the Commanders, especially offensively last night. Now, I will say that they played one of the worst defenses in the playoffs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that game could have went either way, truly. But the Commanders, I don't think, punted last night. So that's pretty darn impressive. They also didn't turn the football over. So that means they literally did not have a drive that did not end in some sort of way, shape, or form in the Bucs end zone, a field goal, right? So Washington was really impressive offensively, and they have been all year. I mean, 4th in EPA per play, so they're a top 5 offense, 5th in success rate. They are explosive. They can run the football. They can throw the football. They're 4th in pass and rush EPA as well. But their problems lie defensively, right? They're 22nd in EPA defensively, 22nd versus the pass, and 27th versus the run. So they definitely have their problems defensively. They have their problems commanding and controlling a game. And I think the reason they beat the Bucs last night is because they possessed the ball better. They possessed the ball more, right? They had control of the game. They got a little lucky with a turnover that allowed them to, get the control back, because it felt like the Bucs had the ball. They were up in the game. They had a chance to go up 2 scores, and then they fumbled. The Commanders capitalized. The Commanders were able to win the game because of that, in my opinion. I really think that game was as close as the fumble. I really, truly think that. And then they had the doink, as Dean says in the chat, to win the game. I mean, this team has definitely had a little bit of fluke to their streak. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They've won like 6 or 7 games in some of the craziest ways I've ever seen. But you also have to say some of it is the makeup of the team. And Dan Quinn has installed a great culture with the Commanders. They believe they can beat anybody. They believe they can win at home. They can win on the road. Jaden Daniels has been a clutch playmaker on game-winning drive after game-winning drive, 4th down after 4th down, 4th quarter after 4th quarter. And that always gives them a chance. His elusiveness, his playmaking ability, his composure, his vision, those things give them a chance. I loved their approach on both sides of the football last night. I thought their ability to play, even if it wasn't great in coverage, to play very aggressive in the box early on, to be able to take away the run and make life difficult on Bucky Irving. I thought that was really a tone-setting move in their game plan, because I felt like if they just would have came out and played soft in the back end, not pack the box. That would have just allowed Bucky Irving to get going, the Bucs to be able to run the ball. But they threw an early curveball, which gave them the advantage in the game, I truly felt. And then on the other side, the ability to run Jaden Daniels, just as we saw Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson do that a little bit earlier in the wild card round. Jaden Daniels was picking up 4 or 5 yards every first or second down on the ground, which set the tone. Tampa was actually playing the run pretty well in a traditional sense, but they couldn't quite get Jaden Daniels on the ground before he was getting 4 or 5 yards. His ability to extend and make some plays, and then Terry McLaurin made some big plays in the game. Zach Ertz made some big plays in the game, right? They're going to have to get more out of their defense moving forward. Their defense is going to have to make a game-changing sack, a game-changing interception, a game-changing strip sack. Something's going to happen to upset a team like Detroit, because Detroit is much better than them, much more talented, right? They're going to be favored by nearly 10 points in next week's game, right? So Commanders are going to have to switch it up. But I do believe that they have a chance due to their composure and their offense and their explosiveness. Let's get to number 8 on the list. Number 8 on the list is the Houston Texans. And again, guys, this is debatable. I could have put the Texans at number 9, but I just really loved what the Texans brought from a defensive perspective. And I think that is more reliable and more upside driven in the playoffs. So I think a defense that we saw against the Chargers that during the regular season was second in time of possession allowed, second in yards per drive allowed, second in plays allowed per drive, right? This was a top 5 defense in many advanced metrics. This defense dominated the Chargers. And they forced Justin Herbert, one of the league's best quarterbacks, to throw not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 interceptions, right? And they had a touchdown, I think, on top of that. So, and then the block on the special teams unit. The Texans are sloppy offensively. We know that CJ has kind of struggled a lot due to his pass protection, but he did have some moments in the game where you saw that rookie CJ Stroud, where you saw that clutch factor, where you saw that big play explosion, where you saw that ability to avoid sacks and negatives and make a big throw down the field. You saw Nico Collins come and just dominate in a certain section of the game. Joe Mixon being the clutch playoff performer he's always been. So it feels like, yes, they're sloppy. They're not complete offensively, but Nico, Stroud, Mixon, even throw in Dalton Schultz, they have enough of a sprinkle of offensive playmaking that makes them dangerous. And then defensively, they probably have the best pass rush left in the playoffs. They've got one of the best corners in the league, Derek Stingley. I think they have one of the fastest groups of linebackers now that they're complete with Christian Harris, Azeez Al-Shaair, and also To'o. So they've got 3 linebackers that can ball and that can cover a lot of space. They did not have that in the previous matchup against the Chiefs. They are banged up at safety, nickel corner, but Lassiter, Stingley are holding it down on the outside. So I think this defense can really slow down a lot of teams. The Chiefs, I think, are going to have a tough time moving the ball. I think this is probably going to be a grinded out game in the divisional round. And who knows if CJ can make the clutch throw, the pinpoint pass to Nico Collins for a bomb down the field, they've got a chance. They've got a chance. Maybe a better one than I would have ever thought, after their regular season finish. Joe Mixon, clutch in the playoffs. Absolutely. Did you watch his career in Cincinnati? Rewind the tape versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, let's get to the number 7 team remaining in the playoffs. The Los Angeles Rams. I have the Rams at 7. Obviously, we haven't seen these two teams play, the Rams and the Vikings, so we don't have any playoff evidence. But the reason I like the Rams at 7 here above the Texans and Commanders, part of it is experience between McVay and Stafford of winning a championship and having the upside of understanding this is a championship pedigree team at the top of their roster, right? But also on top of that, you've got a 5-game winning streak entering the playoffs before week 18. So essentially a 5-game winning streak with their starters, okay? This is a team that beat Buffalo. This is a team that beat Minnesota, right, during the season. So they showed a capacity for upside, right? The Texans nearly beat Detroit. They did beat Buffalo early in the year. Okay, those are great wins. But, recently we saw the Texans lose to Kansas City. We saw them lose to Baltimore. We saw them lose to teams that were going to be in the dance. The Rams have kind of put together a nice little winning streak here. They are top 10 in passing yards, top 5 in plays ran per drive. They're also 8th in time of possession per drive. Those are some of their strengths. They're going to be able to hold the ball. They're going to be able to tie together drives on the ground and through the air. Where they're a little bit weak offensively is actually running the ball in terms of yards per attempt. You would think that Kyren Williams and Sean McVay's running attack would be strong, but it's only 31st in the league in a yards per attempt sense. They run the ball a lot with volume. I actually expect that to change against the Vikings tonight. I think they're going to go pass heavy. I think Stafford's going to throw a lot of attempts, especially on early downs. That's the best way to attack the Vikings. The Vikings are a great run defense, as we'll get to. And I think you need to be able to spread them out and shred them and get the ball out and avoid those blitzes and avoid 3rd down and long to beat them. And Stafford is one of the few quarterbacks that I would actually rely on in the playoffs to throw 40 attempts in a game and win. He's proven it before, and I think he can do it again. Defensively, the Rams have gotten a lot better as the year has gone on, which has kind of aided their 5-game winning streak. Their pass rush is fantastic. It's young. It's athletic. It's definitely a unit that will give Sam Darnold and any quarterback an issue, especially the interior and the quickness and penetration that they bring. You've got Jared Verse. You've got Fisk. You've got Turner. So these guys are awesome. Their secondary is slow. Their secondary is not very good. They don't play a lot of man-to-man. They play a lot of zone. They kind of bend but don't break. But if their pass rush can get there and they can slow down the run, this is a team that has a combination of we can ball possess, we can go on long drives. We've got a great quarterback in these scenarios. We can win in 2 minutes. We can win, in a close game. Where they can kind of get manhandled at times is if teams can get after Stafford and force him off his spot, if they can cover Puka Nacua, and on the other side, if they can kind of dice them up down the field in the secondary. But it's hard to do that against a Sean McVay-led team in the playoffs. So at number 7, I've got the Los Angeles Rams. Now, at number 6, I have the Vikings, the Minnesota Vikings. They're playing tonight. This is a coin flip of a game. I do not know who's really going to win. I picked the Rams, but I'm kind of hoping the Vikings win because the Vikings, I think, have a much better matchup with the Eagles than the Rams do. We saw the Rams get annihilated by Philadelphia earlier in the year on Sunday Night Football. I think a large part of that was the Eagles could block the Rams up front, and that gave, that just allowed Jalen Hurts to do what he wanted. Saquon went crazy. And on the other side of the ball, the Eagles have the best defense in the league. So no matter what the Rams really tried, none of it was really overly successful. Okay. So I went with the Vikings because I think they've got more upside to them. Like they've got an ability, I think, to go to Philly and upset the Eagles. I think they have an ability to hang with the Lions. I know that last time they played, it wasn't exactly that way, but the first time they played, it was very, very close. And they've got a really good coaching staff, Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores. Sam Darnold is streaky, which kind of, it allows you to move them up or down the list. But the Vikings also have an excellent defense, like I talked about with the Texans, okay? So the Vikings, they're 14-3, first of all, in the regular season. That being said, I think that record is a little bit misleading because they didn't play a lot of great teams this year. They swept the Packers. They beat the Texans. They beat a mostly healthy Niners team early in the year. I guess you could add that as like a nice win. But everybody else they played, nobody was really that good. So yeah, they won 14 games and they lost 3, but some of that was, I think, a little misleading because you look at all the non-playoff teams they smoked and it's not really that impressive. But their defense is really good. They're second in EPA defensively, first in run defense EPA, second in pass defense EPA, and they're first in turnovers forced. So they force a lot of negative plays. They force a lot of pressure. They force quarterbacks to make mistakes. That's Brian Flores in his bag, okay? Now, offensively, I think is their weakness. I don't think their offense is bad. It's definitely not as bad as the Texans, but one of the areas that they lack success is controlling a game offensively. They only run the 26th most plays in the NFL offensively per drive. They're 22nd in time of possession, and they're 26th in yards per attempt in running the football. So they're not able to run the ball that well. They don't possess the ball that well. They're mostly streaky and explosive offensively due to Sam Darnold, due to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and their ability to hit the deep ball. But they don't string together long, impressive drives of balance, and that can hurt you in the playoffs and keep your defense on the field more often. But this is a defense that can win them a playoff game due to a couple forced turnovers, due to a couple short fields. They also have got to be, as I knock my mic, they've also got to be really successful in the red zone, which is an area against Detroit that they've really struggled. And Sam Darnold at times this year has really struggled. So red zone is going to be important tonight against the Rams. The next team on the list, which has moved down on my list since watching them play in the wild card round, so I did make some changes. The Philadelphia Eagles at number 5. I was not impressed with the Eagles win over the Packers at all, considering that the Packers, I was much lower on the Packers entering the playoffs than 99% of human beings, because I just thought that Jordan Love had not played all that well all year. He was not going to have Christian Watson. Their defense was not going to have Alexander, two of their best perimeter threats. You know, you look at their statistics with and without Christian Watson, the Green Bay Packers, and it was first in explosion rate, first in yards per route run, compared to 16th or 19th without him, right? So the Packers definitely were not the same offense without Christian Watson, and that showed up. But then not only that, they lost Reed, they lost Dobbs throughout the course of the game, which really hurt them come back, the ability to come back. And then I was really just lacking any sort of impression from the Eagles offense. They did not run the ball as well as I thought they would against Green Bay. Despite Green Bay having a good run defense, I still thought they would be able to run the ball. I thought Jalen Hurts in the passing offense was extremely slow, choppy, inconsistent, and just overall lacking any sort of vision or creativity at all. It was extremely simple, and the Packers were all over it. You've got A.J. Brown, you've got Devontae Smith versus Keyshawn Nixon and Valentine. Like, you should be able to make some plays on the outside, and they were not able to do that. I thought the Packers stunned them a little bit with some blitzes that caught Jalen Hurts off guard. So yes, the Eagles might be the most talented roster in the NFL. They might have the best defense in the NFL, right? They're second in points against, they're first in yards against, they're first in pass yards allowed, they're first in net yards allowed, and they're ninth in yards per attempt allowed in their run defense. But they just feel slow offensively. They're going to need to throw the ball at some point offensively. And I saw some things specifically against the Lions that I think would give them a lot of problems. So that's kind of why I moved them down a little bit. And I think the way that Jalen Hurts is playing, it just doesn't really allow. He needs to elevate his game. He needs to play better. They need to get A.J. Brown in there. They need to get him going. Now, Dallas Goedert played really well. We know what Saquon is. He's an absolute animal. He's the best running back in the league. They have the best offensive line, arguably, in football. Them or the Lions, right? And defensively, I think they're awesome. I just thought they looked really sloppy, and they didn't bring any sort of flavor to the table offensively, which really had me discouraged. They allowed the Packers to hang in the game a lot longer. There is a question about if Saquon runs for a touchdown. Is a different conversation. Not really for me, bro, because I just don't look at the box score that way. I just don't see the game like, oh, this was the score and this is how I feel. I use my eyes. I look at the stats. I try to put a cohesive whole of what I just saw together. And to me, it was just a very slow, poorly played football game by both teams. And, you think about how long that game was going. Like, the Eagles, they scored their first touchdown. They didn't score their second touchdown until when? I mean, and their first touchdown was on a fumble on the kick return in the opening kickoff. So yeah, I wasn't impressed for a team that I was extremely high on going to the playoffs. I picked the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl, right? Like, before the playoffs started. So I'm just a little discouraged. And that being said, they're only second in the NFC on my list, because next up is the Detroit Lions. I have the Lions at number 4. The Lions, I'm just scared about a couple things. So I think when you compare them to the AFC teams, they clearly have the worst quarterback. I mean, Jared Goff has had a great year and he's a good player. But in a Super Bowl, if you're asking me, okay, who do I want with the ball in their hands at the end, or who do I think is just going to be unstoppable in a course of a game? You've got Josh Allen, we're the Buffalo Bills, right? You've got Patrick Mahomes. You've got Lamar Jackson in the AFC. Then you've got Jared Goff. So the offense for the Lions is phenomenal. Great scheme, great O-line, great balance, all that stuff, right? You can go through the stats. First in points for, second in yards for, first in first downs. But at the end of the day, if there's that 3rd down and 8, which quarterback do I want to have with the ball in their hands? So that was part of the factor. But the biggest factor was their defense. Like, I know they played really well against Minnesota. I thought a lot of that was because Sam Darnold puked on himself. Like, I really do believe that there was guys open. I really do believe that a better quarterback, a more composed quarterback, picks that defense apart. I still think that they lack a lot of creativity in terms of changing their identity defensively. They clearly give you a plan, which is they're gonna blitz, they're gonna play man coverage. And with their cornerback group, if they do that against the Bills or the Ravens or the Chiefs, they're probably allowing 30 plus points. So it's going to be a matter of like how many points can they score. So I'm just not all that confident in this defense that was top 10 in defensive EPA and success rate. That was when they were healthy. You look a little bit deeper, they were 20th in yards allowed, 30th in pass yards allowed, and 22nd in yards per attempt rushing allowed, which actually kind of surprised me because they've always been good at stopping the run. I do think they match up decent with the Eagles, though, if they're able to get after Jalen Hurts, blitz him, force him off his spot, make him a little rattled. I think the Lions can get away with their pass defense against Jalen Hurts and the Eagles' simple attack offensively. And the Lions are better against the run than the pass. I also think if there is an offense that can move the ball against the Eagles, it's probably the Lions. But, and it will also be a home game, so that also helps. So I moved them above the Eagles based on what I saw from the Eagles yesterday. But I'm just concerned about this defense when they play one of those elite AFC quarterbacks, which is why I have them only at number 4, if that makes sense. But I think this team is dominant up front on offense, great coaching staff, and this could be their year to finally get to the Super Bowl. At number 3, you guys are going to rather hate me or love me. I'm not sure where you're going to stand on this one, but this is truthfully where I stand on these teams. This is how I feel about who I would pick to win the Super Bowl moving forward. At number 3, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. And there's going to be plenty of people that say, until you beat the champs, you got to rank them number 1, or they're the repeat champs or whatever. And that's fine. I can't debate that. That's perfectly okay. You can rank them at number 1. But a 58-point differential in a season against a schedule that is not all that impressive is really not going to blow me away by any means. And, trying to look at this team, when you compare them to the Ravens and the Bills, I just feel like statistically they don't match up. Like, fourth in points against and 9th in yards allowed. Their defense is their strength of their team, right? They're top 10 in both of those categories. Offensively, they finished 15th in points for, 16th in yards for. So like a top half offense this year based on those metrics. Based on things like success rate, they're a lot higher because where their strength lies is they're first in time of possession. They're first in plays ran. They're very good on 3rd down. They were 2nd in the NFL on 3rd down. Those are their strengths all year. They control the ball. They run a lot of plays. They go 3 yards in a cloud of dust in the run game. They throw a ton of screens. They throw a ton of short passes. Mahomes makes magic happen on 3rd down. That's where they're fantastic offensively. But they don't have any explosion. They don't have any downfield threat. They really don't have any run game. Really. I mean, when you watch them play from a run game standpoint, they're not as good as last year. They're very lethargic. They have no real explosion. And defensively, they're good this year. They're even very good. They're well schemed, but they don't have the defense they had last season where they were able to shut teams down for portions of the game, whether it be the Ravens or the Bills or San Francisco last year. I think the defense is good. I don't think it's all-time special like it was last season. We'll have to see if Mahomes can elevate his game. He's been playing a lot better lately. And if Kelsey can elevate his game and they can become this quick passing assassin out there, maybe they can win a shootout that I don't expect against the Bills or the Ravens. and that could put them over the top. But I do think they're going to have to win one game where they're going to have to score 30 points, which they have not done, I think, all year. I don't think they've scored 30 points all season. And I do think Baltimore and the Bills are going to give them some issues. I mean, Buffalo scored 30 on them earlier this year in that regard. And you really look at the Chiefs. I mean, yes, they had 2 losses or whatever. They had 1 loss to the Bills that was actually a proper loss. But like their best win of the year was in week 1 against the Ravens with the toe out of the bounds. Like otherwise they beat the Broncos, the Chargers, the Bucks, all teams that were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. They haven't really been tested. They beat the Steelers. They haven't really been tested by the Eagles, by the Lions, that they lost to Buffalo. They beat the Texans, who I'm a lot lower on. Like they haven't played the Vikings. Like they haven't really played a high caliber team. So you can say like based on history that they're number 1. And again, I can't debate that. You could say that Andy Reid's the best coach in the league. I can't debate that. You could say Steve Spagnuolo in the playoffs is a GOAT. I can't debate that. But based on their current form and their ability, I don't think they're the best team. I think they're going to lose to the Ravens or the Bills. I think the Super Bowl will be played in the divisional round. I think the Super Bowl will be played between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And the winner of that game, my bold prediction, is the team that will win the Super Bowl, in my opinion. Okay? Let's get to the number 2 team. That is, for me, although this is debatable, the spread, I think, is like 1 point in favor of the Bills. I have been on the Bills more so all year, and I'll explain why once we get to them. But the Ravens are number 2. Okay? The Ravens are number 2. They were impressive against the Steelers. They beat the Steelers senseless twice in a row. That being said, it's hard to know how impressive that win was because the Steelers have been like a bottom 5 team in the league over the past like 6 weeks of the year. So, they dominated the Steelers. The score wasn't like super impressive, but the result was. I mean, in the first half, the Steelers did absolutely nothing offensively. Defensively, they had no answers for Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. And even without Zay Flowers, they went up and down the field and did whatever they wanted. Lamar was magical. They were phenomenal, right? The Ravens, in terms of stats, are the best team in the NFL. Like, they are number 1 in DVOA. They're first in EPA offensively. They're first in rushing offense. They're first in rushing defense yards per attempt. Rushing offense and defense yards per attempt wise. That's really impressive. They're first in pass net yards per attempt. That's really impressive, right? They're top 3 in points for and yards for offensively. They're top 10 defensively in points allowed and yards allowed. They're the best team in the NFL from a statistical perspective. And they won 5 straight, Giants, Steelers, twice, Cleveland, and the Texans. That being said, those are not extremely impressive. The Texans game was very impressive, but the Texans were also injured in that game. The best win for them all season was against the Bills by far. They dominated the Bills earlier in the year. I think this matchup will be a lot different, though, as we'll get to with the Bills. But otherwise, they lost. They played Denver, Tampa, Washington. So just like the Chiefs, they don't really have those 2 marquee wins. They have one marquee win, in my opinion, against the Bills. Otherwise, they didn't play Detroit. They didn't play Philly. They didn't play Minnesota. They didn't play the Rams. They beat Houston really good. They beat Denver. They beat the Chargers. They beat Tampa Bay. Those were wins that I think are solid. But I think that, or they beat Washington. So, yeah, I mean, they beat a lot of the second-tier teams. But, yeah, Lamar has been arguably the MVP. I think he's going to go on to win the award. I think that he's had an amazing year. I think this is the best Lamar we've ever seen. He's a great eluder of pressure. He's phenomenal in terms of extending plays, making plays with his legs, making plays through the air. Zay Flowers is going to be essential. If Zay Flowers is not out there, I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl. But if Zay Flowers is out there, they've got a chance. If Zay Flowers 100%. Derrick Henry is going to have to continue to be an absolute monster for them because I don't think they go on the road and beat Buffalo if he does not shine and have 125 plus yards. I really don't think that's possible for them to beat the Bills without Henry having an absolute amazing game. Defensively, I am still a little suspicious about their results. They've been very, very good lately, but they haven't really played anybody lately, right? They played the Steelers offense. They played the Giants. They played the Browns with DTR, not Jameis Winston. They played the Texans, some terrible offenses. Okay, so they've dominated terrible offenses. Now can they step up in class against the Buffalo Bills? We'll get to the comments, guys, right after the Bills, who are my number one team. The Buffalo Bills are the best team in the NFL, and I would pick them to win the Super Bowl right now because, in my opinion, they have the best player in the NFL, Josh Allen. Josh Allen was once again absolutely nearly perfect against the Denver Broncos. He had the most efficient game of any quarterback this past weekend against the number one defense in the NFL from a number of metrics. The Denver Broncos, based on EPA allowed, were the best defense in the league, and Josh Allen sliced, diced, ran them over, and did everything else in Buffalo yesterday. Now, the Buffalo Bills, in my opinion, are the best team because I think they're healthy. I think that Josh is playing at an otherworldly level. I think they have a great pass protection unit, which the Baltimore Ravens and the Chiefs do not. I think that they have great balance. They're top 10 in both passing and rushing in the NFL, and they're even as good as top 3 or 4 in terms of, success rate and EPA. But in yardage, they're top 10 in both. Their offense was second in points for, only behind the Detroit Lions. Their defense has had some moments of weakness against the Lions and the Rams, but otherwise they've mostly ranked as a top 12 unit in the NFL, and they're right alongside the Ravens. The Ravens have just played a much easier schedule as of late, while the Bills have faced a lot tougher teams. And I think the biggest argument why the Bills is the best team is they beat the Chiefs and they beat the Lions. So the Lions and the Chiefs are the two number one seeds in the NFL. And it's likely that they see the Chiefs and the Lions in the AFC Championship and in the Super Bowl. And if they are able to overcome their loss to the Ravens and bounce back and get revenge, I think that they have a very good chance of beating Kansas City and beating Detroit because they've already done it. And they've done it in dominant fashion. They were blowing the Lions out in Detroit. They were blowing the Chiefs out. That game was in Buffalo, right? The next game will be in Kansas City, right? But Buffalo is also healthy. Matt Milano is back. Von Miller looks in form. Their corners are intact. Their safeties, right? They have everybody there. Against Baltimore the first time they played, they were without both their linebackers, Bernard and Milano, which really hurt them against the run. They were without their nickel corner, Teron Johnson, to cover Zay Flowers and also to stop the run because he's very good against the run. So I think things will change in terms of that matchup. I am leaning towards the Bills, although, like I said, I think whoever wins that game is going to win the Super Bowl. I really believe that. The Bills are also great in terms of turnover margin. That's something that's really been good for them. They're first in turnovers given. So, like Josh Allen, James Cook, they don't really turn it over very often. They're also third in turnovers forced, defensively. So they're a team that is very opportunistic in terms of that. They're also really good on special teams this year in terms of field position. They're top 5 in starting field position offensively and defensively, which helps out both of their units. So I think the Bills, this is the best Bills team we've seen. I'm intrigued to see them play the Ravens. Like I said, I wouldn't hate if you guys had the Bills first, the Ravens first, the Chiefs first. I think those are the 3 top teams in the league. They all reside in the AFC. I think you could put the Lions in that conversation. I just think their defense and their quarterback is just not quite as good as the other teams. Who is the best team in the playoffs? And you guys, of course, vote for the Lions at 33%. The Chiefs are at 19%. The Ravens are at 29%, and the Bills are at 19%. That's interesting. Let's check the chat before we leave. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. Ting says Ravens at number 1. Look at the time of possession and defensive stats. Hey, man. The defense, though, I will say, is look at their schedule lately. They've built up this great track record of improvement defensively against a bunch of bums. So that's kind of my counterpoint to that. Goes says they didn't have the best defense in the league. Then I don't know who he's talking about. The Chiefs? I don't know. Philly crushed Baltimore, says Nick. That was also something I looked at, right? You look at the Ravens and they had a couple losses down the stretch. Not the last 4 weeks, like I said, against kind of some bad teams. But if you look at their schedule, They didn't get crushed by the Eagles, but they lost to the Eagles. And they also lost to the Steelers, which they've since redeemed. But they had that stretch of playing a bunch of, kind of pretty good teams where they played Washington, they played Cincy. So they beat Buffalo. They played Cincy in overtime. They won, but they could have easily lost. They played the Commanders. They won. That was pretty convincing. They beat the Bucs pretty convincingly. That was nice. They lost to the Browns and Jameis Winston. Then they beat the Broncos senseless. Then they should have lost to the Bengals again, but they won because the Bengals don't know how to win a game. Then they lost to the Steelers. Then they beat the Chargers by 7. And then they lost to the Eagles. So that was kind of a stretch of like them playing a bunch of playoff teams. And then since the bye week, they've improved defensively against the Giants, the Steelers, the Texans, and the Browns. So like I'm kind of intrigued to see how their defense plays against a real quarterback and a real team. Washington is your biggest dark horse. No, I don't think so. I think the biggest dark horse, I don't know, man. I don't know who would be considered a dark horse on this list. The Vikings, the Rams, the Texans, the Commanders, I guess, that range of the list. I think the Vikings can really give the Eagles a good game. If the Vikings win, I think if the Rams win, I don't think they stand a chance against the Eagles. I really don't. I think that would be a depressing divisional round matchup. I think it would be suffocation live on television. The Vikings, I think, can really go after the Eagles because they're elite against the run, and they also blitz a ton, which is something Jalen Hurts does not like. And offensively, they're well coached. So I think they would be able to match up on that side of the ball. It would depend on how well Sam Darnold plays. So I'd say the Vikings, they also are very familiar with the Lions, and maybe they could change their game plan against the Lions, perhaps, or Sam Darnold could play a little bit better. That being said, they could also lose tonight, which would suck. The Texans, I think, are slept on just from the standpoint of the Chiefs is a better matchup for them than Buffalo or the Ravens. And I know that they beat Buffalo, but that was extremely early in the season. I just don't think that they would want an explosive offensive team that's really hard to stop. They could play the Chiefs, a team that's more methodical and a team that I think is going to allow them to hang around offensively. And they could perhaps upset them in some sort of defensive game. But that being said, the spread is 8 for a reason. The Commanders, I think, will score on the Lions, but I don't see how they stop the Lions. I think the Lions are going to win by like 10-14, like 38-24 or something. Like I don't think it's really ever going to be that close. That's just my opinion, though. Otto says from here on in the playoffs, the Commanders are over their head. What else we got? The Chiefs are going to win, says Denny. Michael says you clearly don't understand the Thanos level of play that Mahomes brings in the playoffs. I mean, I watched it last year. He really wasn't that impressive in the playoffs against. I mean, if it wasn't for his defense, I don't think they win, to be honest. I mean, he was good against the Bills. That was his best game by far. That Bills defense had like 6 starters out. In the first half against the Niners, he was horrible. Against the Ravens in the AFC Championship, for the first half, he was good. In the second half, he was horrible. I think what was this final score? Like 17-10? So, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I think a lot of it is dependent. He's a great player. He's one of the best of all time. But I think a lot of it is dependent on his supporting cast. We'll see how the offensive line plays. We'll see how the receivers play. We'll see if the run game can get going. I still have questions about that. Bills and Ravens potential to be the best matchup in the playoff. Definitely. I think it will be. I think it should be somewhere in the high 20s, low 30s, back and forth. Too cool says Chiefs have been bend but don't break all year. They can't replicate that. See, bro, I talked about that a little bit in terms of like their competition level. Like they lost to the Bills. They played the Ravens in week 1. They beat the Texans by 8. We'll see. They didn't play Detroit. So can they play that style against the elite teams. We will see. They've beaten the good teams by the skin of their teeth, like Denver. But can they? I mean, again, everything with the Chiefs, if you just looked at their stats on paper, you wouldn't think this team was going to win the Super Bowl. But because of their identity, because of their inner champion, everyone thinks they'll rise to the top, which they can because they're very well coached. They're the best coached team in the league. And Mahomes is capable of carrying the offense. But based on the track record, I really honestly I can't really say that they're better than some of these teams, to be honest. But again, that's just my opinion. And that's how I'm going to end it. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate everybody tuning in. It's Mitch. You can find me on YouTube, The Bottom Line View. Go subscribe over there. I cover all 32 NFL teams. I cover everything from picks, NFL previews, weekly, to offseason, free agency, draft, all that stuff. And I just posted a video about my guy, Mike Vrabel, becoming the head coach of my team. So I'm excited about that. Go check me out on there. And also don't forget to follow me here on BR. I'm here all the time doing live streams. I think I'm here 3 times this week. So make sure to follow me if you like what you heard or if you enjoy the content. Thanks for watching. It's Mitch. We'll see you later. Peace.